Yeah, what we have to understand is that two Enochs were in that period of time. Obviously, Enoch, son of Seth, is sixth generation, so he's more closer to when the giants are going to be created. And Enoch is the son of Cain on the Cainite side. And knowledge is given to both. Both write scriptures. One's polytheist, one's monotheist. So that's why it's important to understand that there are two Enochs, and that the spurious forces or the polytheist forces. When I talk about spurious and polytheist, again, spurious is a perfect word for the offspring of the fallen angels, because it's part of what the spurious meaning is, and that they will draft and corrupt as much as they can to slant it towards their belief system. So you have to be aware of that. So, you know, in a book like First Enoch, even though I like it a lot, we don't have an original Hebrew manuscript to verify its veracity. We get a reference into the Book of Jude. I like to use the Ethiopian version, the Giaz version that's translated, because it's more complete.
That's one I have.
And that it has some corruptions in it. And some of them, I think, are targeted corruptions so that they can conflate the two. And I'll answer that in a second for the audience as to why they're going to conflate it. And you know, some of the corruptions are there for simple things like Enoch is said to be twice 500 years old in the Bible. I mean, in the book of Enoch. Well, we know in the Bible, Enoch, son of Seth, was taken to heaven at 365 years. Right. So we know Enoch went to heaven. We know he saw things. We know he provided scripture. But now they've got an age in there that is for Enoch, son of Cain. Right? So they're trying to conflate the two. And that's because secret societies and Gnostics in the West, they've been hiding from the Roman Church ever since the Roman Church came into power. And so they've been hiding behind and conflating those so that they're not hunted down and persecuted as readily. So when they're talking about Enoch, everybody thinks they're talking about Enoch, son of Jared, but it's actually Enoch, son of Cain. And so you have to understand that they are out there, and they are not only doing that for protection, but they are doing that to deceive people. So then they can lead people into other Enochian literature.
Right. Interesting.
That would, by the writing, seem to come from Enoch, son of Cain. So if you get into the Book of Jubilees, for example, I know people like the Book of Jubilees, but understand the Essenes, and you'll learn all about the Essenes in my book. And if you just want a document on the Essenes, get a hold of me and I'll send it to you. I have a lot of documents I supply at no charge to people.
I would definitely like that. Yeah.
I have a quick question about that.
But
were the Essenes the ones who were credited with hiding the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves of Qumran?
Yes, they're the part of that community. So you have to be careful of everything that's coming out of that, because they were polytheists within the monotheist nature of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? They're the third sect. And they're the first bastion of monasticism in the West, that all of the monastic orders that mole their way into the Catholic Church take their ascetic constitution from, so to speak, in their organizational structure. And so the Book of Jubilees was the most cherished book of the Essenes. And it's a book that is all about the solar calendar. And the Bible and God is about the lunar calendar. And so anything that starts to get into that aspect, you need to get, as you know, whether or not you're Christian or not, you need to understand who the writer is and the message that they're trying to send, right? And so you can critically analyze it. And for Christians, I think it's really, really important that if it doesn't measure up to what it says in the Bible, then you need to understand that that is there to either deceive or to confuse people, but also understand that it's still part of the historical record from the polytheist side.
You know, and it's so interesting because growing up evangelical, learning about church history and the history of the Bible, and then of course with the, the revelation of the Dead Sea Scrolls back in the late 40s, I think it's 48. 47, 48.
Yep.
The
The
Essenes
same
were,
year Israel was
yeah,
established.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
a lot of things happened there.
Star
Yeah.
Rim fan.
Yeah, we had
Notwithstanding.
you had the UFO crashing in Roswell.
Yeah, there are a lot of things.
Hillary
that,
Clinton was born.
yeah.
You know, a lot of crazy
Just
things.
saying.
But
All aliens are demons. I'm just putting it out there.
but what I found interesting about that is that I was always under this unspoken assumption that the Essenes were great, good guys. They preserved the scripture in the
Right.
caves.
That's
They
what
were-
we're taught.
Yeah, they were
And-
this esoteric monastic, if you will.
Yeah.
Order of Jews that
Yeah.
were trying to just preserve things. I never
Yeah,
had any.
and
Much
you're
like
not going to get that
Dark
because the modern sort of deceptions that are going on out there, and Essenes hate me in North America.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
Yeah. I don't know why. They just so they would protect the names of their angels even under death, and these are fallen angels that they worshipped.
Whoa.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Whoa.
they take their religion back to Egypt and Heliopolis, the same place where Moses was educated. And their belief system is that the religion that came out of Egypt that Moses brought with him was the Egyptian religion.
Oh wow.
And that the true religion of Moses went rogue and was corrupted by members of the royal families as the dynasties and the monarchies got set up, and they changed the Bible to glorify the monarchy as opposed to their gods. And so monotheism went rogue. And it's a clever thing that the polytheists have done there, because what they do is they can catch Judaism, Christianity, and Islam with that intersection of Moses and just say, hey, you need to reinterpret everything you thought the Bible said.
Wow, what a subversion.
So do they claim that the teachings that they have, the polytheistic teachings that they have, do they teach that that's somehow encoded in the Mosaic Law, or do they just have a completely other narrative that goes alongside?
They accept parts of the Old Testament and discard other parts, and they totally throw out the first four Gospels. Well, no, not they'll accept the first three Gospels. John for sure gets thrown out, and anything that Paul talked about is out. And just as the book of Revelation is out for them. And then they'll manipulate parts of Matthew, Mark, and John to fit their theology. And so when you look at Dead Sea Scroll writing, you hear about the heretic that they're talking about and the teacher of righteousness. Those are the two key figures coming out of Dead Sea Scrolls and the Essenes. And so the teacher of righteousness will be people like James the Just, who they draft in as an Essene. Jesus, as they draft in as an Essene. And they disqualify Paul as a heretic, and he's the evil liar and the heretic that they're talking about. Because they say it's Paul who raised Jesus to deity status, as opposed to just being enlightened and a prophet.
You know, that's exactly. I experienced this when I was going through ordination class and was an understudy of sorts for the pastor at Grace Point, which was here in Tennessee, kind of a notorious paragon of progressive Christianity. That same mentality of like rejecting Pauline doctrine and sort of cherry picking, drafting Jesus into your pathologically compassionate ideology was like, that was something that really is
no
insidious in the progressive Christian movement.
When they
see
take
it
out
today.
John, I mean, no wonder they took out John. I mean, it's
Right.
The author
They have
and
to.
Jesus themselves
They have to
keep
right.
saying, hey, Jesus is God.
Yeah.
And of course the Johannine epistles and Revelation, they all say that. They all say Jesus is the Son of Man, he's the Son of God, he is God. No wonder they have to take that. And that's funny because our dad used to be, long time ago, was a pastor. And he would always tell us, if someone's going to approach the Bible and they're like, what should I read first? He always said, John or Revelation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My uncle,
Yes.
on his deathbed, 3 months ago, I asked him what book that he would like me to read to him.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not, I'm not super Christian by any stretch of the imagination or anything. That's not my reputation in the family.
Yeah.
But I asked him, and he said, John.
Yeah.
The Book of John.
That's awesome.
You
Yeah,
know?
I would, out of the New Testament, I would definitely say John and Revelation, but also add Matthew, because
Really?
Matthew
That's my
gives
favorite.
you the chronology of end time prophecy that
yeah.
Jesus
24.
orated. And then
Yeah.
Luke and Mark, they give exactly the same thing, but they have just a couple more details and not some of the other details. So I like to use Matthew as the template for that, and then put all prophecy around what Jesus said and not vice versa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is one of the beautiful things about the Genesis 6 conspiracy, and your work in regards to genealogies, because like Nick had mentioned earlier, growing up in church and Sunday school, everybody skips over the genealogies. It's just, they don't know what to do with it, and they don't know how to apply it. They don't know how to make anything relevant out of it. And that your book really kind of illuminates the critical nature of genealogies across history. I mean, every chapter you go to has mentions of royal bloodlines, families, whether they're in priesthood or government, or whether they're connected to the Templars or the Freemasons. Like, this is a book that teaches you how, like, you can apply the genealogies to modern day world events and like what is going on and what the landscape of the world looks like today and maybe what it looks like tomorrow.
Well, and again, it's not important what we believe in terms about the genealogies that all of the royal families and the noble elite of the world, why they track that. What's important to understand is what they believe and what they do with that belief. That's the key. And so they'll track their genealogies all the way back into the mists of time, because the pure and the more ennobled, or let's say grafting in, as in Scion, and that's a classic occult double entendre, Scion as being the first son grafted into another royal bloodline. That's how you ennoble. So, but between the purity of that bloodline back to a specific patriarch like an Albion as a giant, or let's say King Og as a giant, and to the specific fallen angel that produced that line. And then the other ones that are top down onto that is where you fit in that hidden culture. Where you and within that hierarchy is all based on that intermarriage. And that's why you have, let's say, people like Bill Gates, who I don't know what his bloodlines are. He must have some distant bloodlines, but he's not part of that royal elite. He's wealthy, but he's not part of the royal elite. But he is a member of the Bilderbergers by invitation, and he's working for the globalist movement so that he can have his offspring intermarry into those bloodlines and have a larger role in generations to come. And so it's important to understand that these bloodlines are always at work, and that, let's say, for an example, Prince Charles, who may or may not become the King of England, but he's next. But he's next in line.
Right.
He takes his bloodlines not only back to the Stuarts on one side, but also there's a couple of branches of Hanovers that go back to Germany, and then those bloodlines are intersecting with, as he has said publicly, Vlad the Impaler, who I talk about in my book, and the character for Dracula, which is an allegory for the bloodlines, right? And the good versus evil of Christianity against the other side. And Vlad the Impaler takes his bloodlines back to the Scythians as part of the Tuatha De Danann, who, of course, went to Ireland and to Sweden and to Russia and to Germany. There's two different lines of them: blonde hair, blue eyes, pale skin, red hair, hazel eyes. And Vlad the Impaler was this ultimate Tuatha de Danann, the noble Celt. He had pale skin. He had an adversity to light. He was a member of the Bloodlines. He was a member of Ordo Draconis, the Sarkani Ron. He was educated at the Mystery School of Solomon. He had hazel eyes. He had red hair. And of course, within those organizations that he belonged to, they drank blood. I mean, and he was an evil character in terms of all of the horrible things that, he did to his enemies. And so this is the bloodline and of Prince Charles that he proudly, publicly talks about. You just Google it. You can pick it up.
It's amazing.
Off
I didn't know that Dracula was a ginger. I had no idea. But that's really interesting, because I was reading about the Tuatha Danann. I know I'm butchering that, and those bloodlines, and it's
Can
cool
you pronounce it again, Gary, for us?
Tuatha de Danann. Some people just say Tuatha Danann. They're also known as the Tuatha Danu, which is the tribe of Anu, which is another. And again, I'll talk all about that as you get through the book.